listening to Awake in Relationship, a podcast about intimacy, community, and culture in a time of great change, with Silas Rose.
Hello, my name is Silas Rose, and this is Awake in Relationship. So after 2 months of COVID lockdown, many of us might be feeling somewhat fearful or even anxious about human contact again. Touch is such a part of our mental well-being, but it's also a critical part of building relationships with others. And without it, close relationships and even communities begin to unravel. In this episode, I'm going to be chatting with Tricia Bowler and Michael Haines, who for the past 6 years have been creating a container for conscious touch up in the Cowichan Valley called Being Held. So we're going to be talking about their innovative and transformative work, hosting these Being Held gatherings, as well as some hard advice on creating the conditions of safety for reintegrating touch in this post-COVID era. Enjoy. Welcome, Michael and Tricia, to Awake in Relationship.
Thank you.
So I kind of forget, where we're at in the global pandemic, but I'm wondering kind of how life in lockdown has been for you folks up in Cowichan.
Quiet. And shaggy.
And shaggy, nice.
That'll probably be my first real public event, I guess, is going for a haircut. So, yeah.
Well, I think the reason it's been particularly quiet is because we are used to a steady flow of friends and different folk that are interested in us and what we're up to. Like probably every other day we would have somebody in our home or at a gathering or creating something. And so, yeah, it's been super quiet that way.
Let's kind of launch right in and tell us a little bit about Being Held and the sort of original inspiration.
We were talking about this morning and went down a number of different alleyways, but we kind of distilled it down to one moment when we began our relationship as being a catalyst for this, which happened when we were dating, I guess, weren't we, Tricia? We were dating. First, we'd already decided we're going to be serious with each other, but we were driving along in a car one day, and Tricia turned to me and said, is it okay if I share you? And that's a pretty revolutionary comment to hear coming at you. And in that moment, my mind went, okay, so this is a big question. And I realized in that same question was, are you okay with sharing me? And after a moment's thought and sort of settling into what was true inside me, I said, yes. And ironically, that intention that was right at the very beginning to share each other was really a catalyst of trying to figure out how to be safe in that process. Because being held is really ultimately about creating safety for people to come into connection with one another and sort of, no matter who you're touching or how, in a way, you're able to have this experience of worthiness inside you, and not have your worthiness external to other people's other people's opinion about you or their experience of you.
Yeah. So making that request, you could say, between Michael and I, and those commitments to be open and supportive of each other in that is one thing to have those statements made, and another thing is to actually live it and be congruent, I could say, at the neurological level. So even though in the past I had successfully done that over many years, for some mysterious reason in my relationship with Michael, it proved to be far more difficult for my neurology to hold in. And I think that the generation of the being held container processes was something that got developed as trial and error between Michael and I and others about what could actually support us and others to create that. So yeah, it's emerged over several years. I think about 6 or 7 years. It's been emerging, and it's still emerging. We're still discovering and creating new things to help us and others be safe and stay connected in a trusting community.
Mm-hmm.
So we did look for inspiration from a number of different avenues. I think some of the things, just to give you a quick list, is we read early on Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan and Casilda Metha. We really enjoyed looking at some of the work of Dieter Doom and Sabine Lichtenfels at Tamara, the biotope in Portugal, and some of their conversations and writing about freeing love. We another influence was doing the intimacy education workshops with Kath and Jesse on Salt Spring. And we also had some wonderful kind of eye-opening experiences going to new culture camps. And also, I'd say, it was, obviously a lot of our friends who got kind of involved in our process were very, very helpful in moving this all along. And I don't want to leave out Thomas and Joan Hartfield, who we had the wonderful opportunity to gather and circle with on Maui, who do some really interesting heart connection games, which kind of solidified that, for us, that there was a way for people to come together and explore these sorts of things. So that's, I don't know if I've left anybody out, Tricia, that comes to mind.
Oh, that sounds great.
Maybe we can go into talking about what a being held gathering might look like.
Yeah. So a being held gathering is bringing together people who may or may not know each other into a safe space, typically in our yurt, but it has we have taken it on the road on a number of occasions. And throughout the creation of the being held gatherings, we kept looking to modeling our safety structures throughout the day. So we really did build this day as a way for people to get safe in the four, what we called originally the 4 quadrants of body, soul, mind, and heart. And we built those activities around that. And so typically we start off with an overview of the safety pillars and people introducing themselves. One of the things that Michael created in the introduction, which I think is so beautiful and magical, is we introduce ourselves based on what is alive in us right now, what is creating vulnerability in us. And this way of sharing creates softness in the room and openness and a deep level of connection with each person that's in the room. And then we go into our first connection structure, which is creating safety through what originally we called soul safety, which is eye gazing, and a process of people meeting each other equally through hand touching. And we do that with each person that's in the room. And this allows everybody to meet everyone in the room. So right off, we're hearing their vulnerabilities, and then we're getting a chance to gaze into their souls, so to speak, and hear about what's alive in them right now. So that sets a beautiful container for us to move into other activities. So Michael, you want to share some more activities?
Yeah, I was just going to say, why a day instead of like a 2-hour evening or 3-hour evening? Really, for us, deciding on the day was realizing that to create a safe enough space for people to come into connection with one another, to actually touch each other in ways that are that our culture would define as intimate, even though it's very platonic. We realize that it takes some time to create that safe enoughness with a group of people. So, the morning is largely gauged or geared towards creating that safe container space, and then we have lunch together, and then in the afternoon we get into more types of things like something we call the 5 elements of touch, which is touch language, and then we do a variety of experiences of touch, always again, checking in, debriefing, making sure everybody's sort of still in that safety zone. And eventually we move into what we call a long hold, which is everybody gets to create their own with 2 other partners. We work in pods of 3. They get to create their own hold based on some part of them that is alive in them that would like to be held. If we jump right back to the beginning, for us as kids, when we had those either very high, full of elation experiences or difficult experiences, our first impulse is to want to go to our parents and be acknowledged and held. And sadly, in our culture, often we don't have either the ability or the time or whatever within family structures to have that happen. But it's like, here's your chance. There is time. We've got time right now, and you get to create a way to be held for whatever it is you're experiencing in whatever way you'd like to be held. So, we can talk about the neurology of that experience, but that's what happens during the day. And then we wrap up with a checkout, and everyone heads home.
I'm just kind of curious, who, without breaking confidentiality, who's kind of showing up at these gatherings, and what's sort of drawing them in?
Yes, well, over time, I think that has expanded who's showing up. I think originally when we first started offering these, there was mostly local people that would come, either through they knew us or we had a meetup group that people would come to. Now our community has expanded. There's people from the new culture that have been very interested in coming to our gatherings. There's people who have been connected to us through various other communities, say in Victoria and Nanaimo and Vancouver. And these range in age from late 20s to we had one fellow come who had his 80th birthday at one of our gatherings.
Oh, yeah.
And so it brings a mix of that, and it brings a mixture of gender fluid people, people who are interested in tantric and want to see how this might be different than tantric, or people who've experienced a cuddle party and want something a little bit more structured, or where they feel a little safer. So there's a real mixture. Dominantly, we have people, of course, around our age group, but it is expanding, and we're very pleased with that younger people are seeing that possibly structures around connection can actually be helpful. And so that's been really, really heartening on our part.
I think the strongest way for people to feel comfortable coming is through word of mouth. But, and they come because we probably hear 2 things most commonly: that they want more connection, and or they have been going through something very difficult in their life and really just want exactly that, some place to be held in that. Mm-hmm. And I won't say that it's always word of mouth. We were laughing this morning about how I, for quite a long time now, I've been putting little posters up all around town. Mm-hmm. And in all that time, we've had one person come from reading that poster. But ironically, that one person has become extremely significant in our lives. A young French-Canadian woman who's now living on our property. And, we can probably talk about a little later, but has been so enthused about the work that she wants to create what she's calling, what we're calling, the Being Held Institute, which is an opportunity, an online opportunity to learn more about some of the things we're talking about today.
Right. Yeah. So it really is this kind of genesis of a new community.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, Silas, is that people are looking for community, and they're looking for community that's where there's belonging. And I believe that the philosophy of being held is of belonging, and people feel that. They feel like there's a place for them because the actual culture of being held is acceptance of all of us, of all of our parts, even our messiness. So there's an inclusion, a very high level of inclusion.
So you both are trained in, kind of multiple modalities, and you've kind of named some inspirations already. I'm kind of wondering how this work, particularly kind of somatic-based work, how do you feel that really supports more kind of traditional forms of therapy, say counseling or other kind of more cognitive-based practices?
Well, I think what we've come to understand is that our intelligence just isn't our brain. It's not just about conversation. It's not just about working through our thoughts. It's not just working through what goes on in our mind. It's also about the intelligence we carry in our body. So we carry a lot of trauma, of lack of acknowledgement, I guess, or even fear sometimes in our body neurology. And that's why I think it's so important to include some form of somatic work, that touch-based work, in order to, there's a truth in our neurology, in our skin, and some of the cells in our skin, which was one of the really wonderful discoveries we made on this path, that our skin actually has a communication structure primarily through C cells or C fibers, which are the skin cells that communicate bonding and love to that part of our brain which deals with that. And if we're not including that part of our intelligence, and it doesn't feel like it's complete. I love the analogy of, you can do, you as a child, it's what I call the red umbrella analogy, which I remember hearing somewhere. But, if as a kid you were hit with a red umbrella, you can do a lot of work with your mind and talk about it and work through it, et cetera, but still later on in your life, someone could pull out a red umbrella suddenly, and your body will react without you even thinking, without it even being conscious. So it's just about that fact that we carry those memories in our neurology as well. So for us, that's the essence of being held, is, again, that part of our neurology really does communicate safety and love and bonding and belonging and worthiness, all those things.
I imagine that some people are coming into the room with some pretty deep wounds, and this is really kind of, transformative work. I'm just wondering, so how do you create that safety?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. I think the container does two things. One, we set it up to be as safe as possible, and two, just the fact that we have the container we do, which includes touch, can trigger people. So yeah, we definitely have experienced that in our gatherings for sure, and even I think some of the people who have been, I'm going to use the word triggered in the gatherings, I think they've been surprised by it. I think some of these people have come in with years of therapy and felt like they've got this part managed, and then something happens and it's not managed. So I think how we attempt to make it safe is through our guidelines, through our safety pillars, that we use. One of the things that we do is in the safety pillars, we teach about emotional accountability as a capacity that needs to be developed. Everything we do, we talk about capacity building. It's not like it's not like Michael and I have got this all together. We don't. We're still doing capacity building. And so recognizing that each one of us is in a process of, you could say, rewiring our neurology to feel safe enough to give and receive touch and I'm going to say love, right? Which is what we all really long for as part of our humanness. So recognizing that we're all on a path of that and setting up structures that help people choose what's safe enough for them. We have something we call going to your edge. So going to your edge is staying in your zone of tolerance, where you can manage what's going on. Now, sometimes if we go over that edge and we find ourselves being triggered and wanting to blame other people for what's going on, then that person needs to be held however they wish to be held in that moment. But it's about recognizing that that's actually what's going on, that that we've been triggered into something that is beyond our ability to be with. So we really focus on letting people be empowered to say, no, I can't do this activity, or no, I can't do it unless we make it slightly this way so that I can be with this activity. So one of the things we talk about right at the very beginning is thanking the no. And we set that up really clearly, that every person that says no, we thank them. Thank you for taking care of yourself. We have structures in the room, like we have a mat in the yurt, and we say, you don't have to tell us why you're going on that mat. You don't have to say anything. You can just walk over and put yourself on that mat, which is saying no thank you to this activity. So we create ways of doing that people don't have to explain what's going on or even know what's going on. They just know they don't want to be part of it. So over time, we've been seeking to set up structures like that continue to make it safe enough for people to be part of it at whatever level they can be part of it, and to be accepted no matter what happens, no matter what comes up for them, that all of that is lovable and acceptable. It's a part of them that's feeling unsafe, and it's perfectly okay for it to be present. So those are the things and we're still working on that. We haven't got it perfect.
Right.
That's what we try and do.
I was just going to say our safety pillars themselves have gone through an evolution and will continue to evolve. But early on, we realized that safety is, the different parts of us need different kinds of things to feel safe. So there's mind safety. What allows the mind to feel safe and to be able to open? There's heart safety, which is the emotional part of us, our emotional side. How does it feel safe? There's the physical safety. How do we feel safe physically? There's also spiritual safety or soul safety. How does that part of us feel safe enough to open and to receive? So we had a number of things under each aspect of those four different parts of us, but it was quite a complicated list to look at, like almost overwhelming. And so we've now distilled it down into 6 basic safety pillars, which we know incorporate all those facets of mind, heart, body, soul safety. And again, it's, we learn every time we do being held about little aspects that we can also expand and include in that safe enoughness, creating safe enoughness.
It really kind of strikes me what you're kind of talking about is sort of a mindfulness practice in terms of giving people an opportunity to kind of understand the responses at a very kind of deep and subtle level. And then choosing, as you say, it's kind of empowering to be able to kind of recognize what's arising in the moment and then make, corrective action.
Yeah, and that
Absolutely.
doesn't always happen in the moment, but that is part of the capacity building, which you outlined so beautifully, is that conscious choosing. But sometimes when we're in the middle of something, a trauma trigger, we're not that able, our capacities aren't that able to do that. And so it is a practice. And we talk about these principles and safety things as practices because we never know sometimes when we're going to get hijacked. We just don't know. And so we have to be aware be gentle and kind with ourselves when that happens, and say, yes, well, I'm seeking to do this, and sometimes it just I lose it or whatever. And so the context and the container is one of supporting each other and ourselves to stay in gentle acceptance of whatever it is that's arising.
Yes. So our basic 6 safety pillars that we have now are, just briefly, are meeting equally, which is about meeting another person energetically and physically in all ways, really practicing meeting that person without pushing in or pulling away, just being present, like really being present with the with that other individual. There's thanking the no, which is the process of keeping the connection open, even though someone's possibly not feeling comfortable and wants to say, no, I don't want this. But so it's almost like thanking it keeps the opportunity for connection going, and honoring that person's voice. We have a safety pillar we call no fixing, for which we very thankful to Matt Licata and Jeff Foster for. In some ways, they were part of the inspiration of that, which is there's nothing in us that needs fixing. Everything in us is beautiful and acceptable in some way. And so, rather than even saying, "Oh, you're okay," or the traditional things that we so quickly come up with when someone's feeling uncomfortable about their own experience, we are focused on being with. That's one of the strong themes for safety, is just to be with that person. And being with very much is about being with that truthful communication of loving touch.
Yeah, and I just want to say too that being with has emerged in the last year as being a key component of what we're about, because traditional ways of thinking about uncomfortable feelings or even uncomfortable thoughts is to get rid of them, let them go, release them, all those kinds of things that we have been striving for maybe all of our lives, or basically get rid of it so we don't have to feel it or think it. We are practicing being with those at the individual level, so that we can actually be with others who are experiencing the same thing, not because we want to suffer, but because there's usually something very important in those feelings or in those thoughts that needs to be held and loved and accepted, so that it can actually, instead of cutting those parts off of ourselves, we can return to wholeness. So that's a really big piece that's emerged that we're finding super useful.
Right. So the next safety pillar actually is accountability for our parts, which is honoring those parts of us that to know that it's not all of us that is reacting in a certain way, that it's just part of us, and it's like bringing home all those parts of us into wholeness. So there's accountability for our parts, being accountable for one of our parts gets triggered or gets really emotional or is seeking some kind of acknowledgement, whatever it might be. And then just the last two, meaninglessness. Again, the reason we ask as a safety pillar for meaninglessness, which is always a bit of a conversation, is really just the acknowledgement that we're asking people to get out of our cultural stories, to get out of our to really just not let cultural meaning be present in the room, but just let our presence and the truth of touch, loving touch and presence be the foundation. And the last is connection structures, which are just the safety afforded through having a process for connecting with one another that's safe and there's a structure for that flow. So
that sounds wonderful. And it sort of makes me, especially now that we're kind of living in this strange time, COVID era, post-COVID era, I don't know what we want to call it, but basically, human contact is on some level being discouraged.
Yeah,
and there's no sense of how or when that's going to change.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious, if you have any kind of suggestions about applying these principles to our audience, people in their own lives, how they could create their own bubble of safety and connection at this kind of peculiar time.
Yes, that's definitely something that's been on our mind for ourselves and for people that are longing for this. I mean, there's many people in our community who've reached out to us and said, when are you going to have a gathering again? And we are not sure about that, but we do know, and we're going to do something fairly quickly about this. Michael and I have been talking about recently of creating protocols so that people can be in safe enough bubbles with those that they know and trust. I'm going to say that are maintaining the equal amounts of social distancing. So we feel, Michael and I feel close enough to people who maintain the same level of social distancing as we do. And then other people, like they have much lower levels of social distancing, but they feel safe with other people at the same level. So I think it's an individual thing. And so when there are protocols written up, they're kind of black and white. You know what I mean? And so when they're black and white, then you've got somewhere to talk to somebody about that, saying like, oh, so are you wearing a mask when you go shopping? No. Okay. Well, I don't either. So you know what I mean? But if the person says, oh, well, I do, well, then is that an issue for you that you don't? Well, yeah, it is. Well, do you think you would be willing to wear a mask then so that we could be in close proximity? Oh, yeah, I could do that. So it's like creating agreements for how you want to be in your world. And then those people, you can let your neurology relax because this is kind of like the mental safety, right? It's like, I know this person is committed to keeping me safe and they're going to do it by doing this. And so I'm going to let them into my bubble and then I'm going to feel really able to relax when I'm around them. Because if we don't do that, if we're wondering, we're in the not knowing, then the mind takes us out. The mind puts us into anxiety. And then we think we want to be close to that person, but we actually, our bodies refuse to go there. So it's a fascinating process, I think, that COVID's created of unconscious resistance to being in connection with people. And I was saying to Michael this morning, we've practiced now social distancing for 2 months and our psyche is actually in resistance right now to connection. So in some ways, we need to create new neural pathways that say, this person is safe enough. I'm going to be willing to let myself be with this person. So we're working on that right now. And we're talking about doing a chimp mail out to everybody on our Being Held list, which I think is about 250 people, but of what that could look like to regenerate safe enough containers for people to be in close, intimate connection with each other. Did you have anything more to say about that, Michael?
Well, I think if there's any silver lining to this whole experience is it, I mean, it's quite fascinating to me that it is like a completely no touch kind of outcome that we've kind of found ourselves in. I mean, it's completely opposite to being held, but if there's any silver lining, it would be just realizing again how deeply we do need touch and connection with one another. The lack of is a very stark, almost like neurological experience. We were laughing yesterday because we had a family Zoom call with my kids, and my son was at his work where they do social distancing and happened to be standing in a doorway, and someone lightly put their hand on his back, and his reaction was like, "Who touched me?" Not in an angry way, just like in a shocked kind of way that someone actually touched his body, because it was so suddenly so foreign to feel someone actually put their hand on you. So, the importance of connection through touch is, I think, really been has really come home for a lot of people through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's a great example. With your son, and in the sense I really feel that, this is a continuation of something that's been going on for too long. It's sort of dystopian in my mind that we've been social distancing for God knows how long now. And it's just a progression. This is a big leap backwards, I might say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, we talk about creating communities of trust. And, through this experience, through this pathway, we've realized that to have a community, you have to trust is the foundation of community, and you can't fully have trust with one another if you're not actually coming into connection and touching and holding one another. That, you can talk all you want, but unless we're doing that aspect, that is part of the strength of our human condition. Like, why our strength of being in the world is through our sharing and trusting one another and gifting one another and being in connection with one another. So obviously, we can't continue in this situation where everybody's completely afraid of touching one another. It just isn't part of our human condition or our human way of being.
Well, yeah, and I think, just to talk from a personal experience here at Sancta Amo, we have several people living on the property, and because of different levels of willingness for social distancing, Michael and I haven't been touching the people who live on the property, which we were doing all the time. Like, we were in close proximity and we had physical connection, and now we don't. And I have noticed a breakdown, I would say, in connection that has struck me in such a deep way that it's brought sadness to me, and like, I felt like I have to tell these people how much I love them every day, because I'm not touching them, because the touch was actually carrying that loving message, and without it, the mind goes like, this person doesn't care. It's so fascinating. And I've watched that relationship with my adult son, the same thing. We've had a very open, touching relationship, and with COVID, I could feel the sadness in him. It was like he was starting to get the impression that I didn't care. And so I've had to have conversations with him over and over again, saying, yes, I love you so much, and I miss you. And even though that doesn't land, because it's just words, it's like a way of soothing the neurology that says it's just for now. We'll be back together again. And so I think that's really important to recognize that love is something that's communicated through our touch, and that communities need that to keep nourished and sustainable. Without that, it's hard to believe we actually care about each other. So I think there's something really critical going on here.
And to work through conflict as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I think so many of us are hitting Zoom fatigue. And that really doesn't fill the love bucket, and that's why I think your work is so important, and why I wanted to kind of feature you on the podcast. And I'm just kind of wondering, what is the future for being held? And you mentioned the Institute. Maybe you could share a little bit about that vision.
Yeah, I mean, this really started, again, just with Tricia and I exploring our own relationship and how to be in the world in a different way. And I'm not sure that, maybe we had some scope in those days, but I think our vision for the future is the more people that we can, if sharing what we've learned helps people create their own connection in communities of trust and building communities of trust, then I think that's wonderful. So, how do we, I guess we were sort of confronted by this idea by Marie, the gal who's living on our property, because she's very excited about sharing this with more people. And she brought up the point, like, if somebody doesn't come to a Being Held gathering, how will they ever have the possibility of learning what you guys have to share? And we realized that, yes, we probably should have a format or a way of sharing some of this information. So if someone on the other side of the planet could listen or read it and find a way to begin perhaps building a community of trust within their own circles. So I think that would be our vision, is like, it would be so wonderful if small communities of trust can pop up all over the world. Obviously, we need this. We need people to come into connection. I mean, all we have to do is look across the line and see what division and mistrust and separation creates. It creates, a world that's not very attractive. So, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing too, I was thinking that, having been in conversation with some of our close mentors, is that there may be for years a feeling of lack of safety of a group of strangers coming together and physically touching each other. There may be that. We don't know. We can't see that far into the future. But one of the things that we're visualizing is that if we have a being held gathering and we work in pods of 3 dominantly, I mean, sometimes we work in bigger pods than that, but dominantly we can work in pods of 3, that we say to people, bring 2 people that are in your bubble, bring 2 people that you can be with and not have to worry. And then we might have 6 pods of 3 that show up that don't know each other, but they're not necessarily interacting with each other at those close in levels that we might have that pod of 3 working at. So that's one of the things we're looking at is really encouraging and promoting that people notice, who are those people that I might want to bring to a being held gathering with me, that I'm so trusting of, that I'm willing to give and receive from them in close proximity. So that's one of the things we're looking at. And then of course we do something else which is called the deep dive, which is just 3 people. So we either facilitated or participated in ourselves, which brings of course people together who highly trust each other in terms of right now I'd say the COVID scare, but it could be for other reasons as well, right? That they actually trust that person at all levels, soul, heart, mind, and body. And so they're willing to do something that's intense. The deep dives are intense and longer, and experience that. So those are some of the things that we're looking at doing that can carry this work forward no matter what the world looks like. And we have no idea. There might be another virus around the corner. We have no idea.
This is probably a good place to end, and I'm just kind of wondering what or how people that want to connect with your work can be in touch.
Well, we have a variety of ways that people can do that. We have a Facebook page, Being Held, which is a private group, but you can just go on and click on join, and Michael and I will look at just click on the button to allow. We also have a website called beingheld.ca. People can go on there and they can communicate with us directly by email on that, and they can make a request to be on our chimp mail outs, which we do. We used to do them once a month. We've sort of slowed down a little bit in that, but we're going to do one soon. And that gives a lot of information. Oftentimes Michael's writing something about being held in that, like explaining something in more detail. What was the other avenue, Michael?
You can email us at tm@beingheld.ca if you have questions.
That's for Tricia Michael.
Yeah, TM. Not trademark, Tricia Michael, yeah. And I invite anyone. They can friend me on Facebook too, because you'll definitely have information on there. And I on Facebook I go by MJ Haines. I think those are the basic ways.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. And what I might actually want to do, I don't know if you have a write-up on the 6 pillars, but maybe I can include that in the show notes, and also include links to your website and other contact details. So
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and we also have one of the pillars is the Being Held connection structure, which we can attach to that as well. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Silas.
Thanks again to Tricia and Michael for this great chat. And if you want to find out more about their work, you can head over to beingheld.ca. And I'm going to post the Pillars of Safety in the show notes to this episode, so you can see that at awakenrelationship.com. Also, feel free to sign up for the newsletter. And, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe. And for bonus points, I'd really appreciate a review. So, till next time, stay connected.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Awake in Relationship. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe to get the latest show delivered fresh to your device, or sign up for our newsletter at awakeinrelationship.com. Sharing is caring.